Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episodes and hopefully I think our audience are getting lot of calls, lot of messages from audience because both of you are joining today with World Talent Economy Forums. Uh, you know that we are actually trying to create a knowledge-based community, and I want to give a special thanks to this Transhumanist Party, TAFFD. They're taking a lot of initiative and they also supporting us, and people like you are contributing for World Talent Economy Forums. So first, I want to start with Mr. David Shumaker. He is from USA, and Mr. David Wood, he is from UK. I think already World Talent Economy Forum's audience, they know about you. You already previously you joined with us. Uh, I want to know more about USA from David Shumaker and about Europe from Mr. David Woods. What's going on? What do you want to share? Yes.
Well,
Mr. David.
I'll start with the USA. So behind me, you see Phoenix, Arizona, so state in the desert southwest of the United States. Today, I'm wearing a special cowboy shirt that blends the past and the present and the future. So these are planets and of a typical cowboy type of design. And the whole idea is here in Arizona, where I serve as chairman of the Arizona Transhumanist Party and as well as a director in the United States Transhumanist Party, is to bring political thought back to science, health, and technology, and to work with our local political leaders as much as possible. And I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of specifics as we go on, but in general, I would say that the biggest thing that we're talking about these days are COVID, the economic impact, what science has to do with that. And there's a great blending of bringing the traditional Western United States values and merging that with science and technology. So that's what I'm spending a lot of time doing these days.
Excellent. Mr. David Wood, what do you want to share about Europe, about UK, and your transhumanism philosophy?
So it's a time of great change. Obviously, the coronavirus is causing all kinds of change in how people are living, working, but it's not the only thing that's driving change. We have these online communications tools, which mean that ideas are traveling around the world much faster and more readily than before. And we have remarkable improvements in technology, not just artificial intelligence and deep learning, but also things like genetic editing, biotechnology, synthetic biology, quantum computing, other nanotechnology, and increasingly as well, technologies that can help us think better, to be clearer in our emotional well-being. So all of these things bring lots of possibilities, including bad possibilities, as well as good possibilities. And transhumanism aims to be the philosophy that guides us. What should we be doing and embracing with these scientific and technological possibilities? And what should we be more careful about, more cautious about? Because there are plenty of bad possibilities with this technology being magnified to aid destructive purposes as well as the constructive ones. So transhumanism says we can use these technologies to bring human nature to a higher level. And we can have humans not being bound or constrained by the same kind of limitations which have held us throughout all of our history. So for most of history, people grew old and died. Actually, many people died at very early and young age. That's no longer necessary. For most of history, people had very little knowledge about the universe, and we were quite stupid in many ways. And transhumanist says technology can help us transcend that, and we can have super intelligence. And for most of history, we couldn't imagine leaving the Earth, but as per the design on David Shumaker's dress, we can aspire to being in the planets. We can go to outer space, and indeed we can go to a new inner space. So all of that's possible if we can see it clearly and set aside distractions, bring people together in a constructive way, put our minds to it, and seize these good opportunities. That's what transhumanism invites people to do.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, sir. Araf Mehraj, he said, "Hello, sir. Nice to meet you. I will be a nice discussions. I think it will be a nice discussions. Definitely, audience are observing you, uh, sir. I want to ask one of the specific things like." You have your objective with your transhumanist party, and even all of you actually with your professional experience, you have many more success, and you are a very good philosopher and scholars. So what do you want to define your objective, and how do you want to define the objective of transhumanism, and what do you want to share, especially developing nations like Malaysia, developing nations like India, like Indonesia? What do you want to say? And yes.
Well, I would say that putting science, health, and technology at the forefront of our thoughts is a great way to get started. As this program's label talking about philosophy of transhumanism for this decade, I was looking at, so what do I really think, that means? And I really think that rational thought, rational, even-handed discussion, focus on policy versus what people typically think of politics. I think those are good philosophical points to look at. And that doesn't mean that we need to necessarily give up things that we treasure from our past. There is a strong Western tradition here in Arizona that people are very tied to. And there's no reason that that needs to be given up to look to go to the moon, in perhaps as little as 2 years, or go to Mars in as little as perhaps 4 years. We can do all those things together. And I loved what David Wood said about not succumbing to distraction and putting our best efforts forward. So from a philosophical point of view, I think that's what it is. It's putting our best efforts forward, but grounded in reason, science, and with a focus on health.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, should we be looking backwards to a possible golden age in the past that we should try to recreate? Or is the best in the future? And transhumanists do say that the future can be very much better than the present. There has been progress in some ways in history, with longer lives, with more education for all people, for spread of knowledge, for spread of some elements of prosperity. That is encouraging, but what's ahead of us actually could be so much better. We could be building a very clean and sustainable world by using new technology to accelerate green energy, capturing energy better from the sun, the wind, and the waves, and distributing it for everyone. And this isn't just for people in a few countries, such as the USA and Europe. It absolutely is possible in so-called developing countries as well. And people in all of these countries can aspire to have better quality of life than even the royalty and the monarchs and the princes and principalities of the past. Actually, we can have a much better life, and we can have the quality of experience and consciousness which maybe in the past just a few saints and mystics and gurus occasionally could point us towards. Well, we can get there much better and much more quickly by combining some of the insights of these wise people of the past, but also using technology to help us. Just as we use technology to help us become physically fitter, we can use technology to help us be intellectually fitter, emotionally fitter, and spiritually fitter. So we can anticipate sustainable superabundance for everyone in, I think, just maybe a couple of decades.
Sir, one point I want to come, because in present COVID situations, two major points. Number one, healthcare system, and number two, because of this economic instability, there are more people now become unemployed. What do you want to share? What do you think? What will happen in this healthcare systems? I think we need to improve a lot in healthcare system, as well as we have to be more focused on the youth community, those who are unemployed right now, how we can fix our economical challenges. Yes.
The healthcare system here in the United States has come under a lot of scrutiny, especially with COVID. COVID has been one of those things that is magnifying what has always been, but now some of these things are easier to see. The healthcare system here in the United States is distributed. It's competitive from the standpoint that it's individual businesses, hospitals, doctors, suppliers, and that's proven to have some challenges in when you need an orchestrated response into something like COVID. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Our current upcoming election here in November has a lot of talk going around about reforms for healthcare, and that's been going on for some time. Perhaps we'll take a more centralized healthcare ideas going forward. I look to other countries like David's UK and look at the health organization that's there and in some of the other countries. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out here, but I think that is a big magnifier. And to your second question about unemployment, that is, there's multiple answers to that, I suppose. I have a daughter that lives in another state, and she was first in the theatrical business. She worked stage manager backstage for huge stage productions, and found that she could make more money actually running restaurants, and she went into the restaurant business. So she has a degree in theater and she has a minor in business, and she was doing quite well until COVID shut down all the restaurants and put them in very limited supply. So once again, being a resourceful young woman, she now works from home in a different type of job. So she took responsibility in these cases for finding ways to use what she had already done in the past to be able to leverage herself for the future. I'm not saying that that's everyone's solution, but it is one solution. I think government can do some things to help. I think private business and charities can do some things to help. But that's still working in the framework of what we have now. I think we've been progressing, say, like in retail industries, for example. Large retail chains here in the United States have gone bankrupt while online retail has flourished. COVID is another magnifier of that, driving more people to that. I've been doing almost exclusively online, everything from groceries to any other kind of shopping that I need to do. So maybe from the second standpoint of what can people do for unemployment is do what you can for yourself, look for opportunities, and if you have opportunities that you can grant others, do those as well.
So Sharif, you asked a couple of great questions there, and we might take some time to explore them more fully. And I'd like to build on the very good points that David Shumaker has already made. So let's start with what COVID is helping us to think about the healthcare system and the ways in which transhumanism would envision the healthcare system changing in the light of COVID. So one thing we've learned from COVID is that if you're older, you're more likely to fall ill seriously with COVID. And it's the same with most other chronic diseases, in fact. It's the same with infectious diseases too. The older we get, actually it exponentially increases the probability that we will have a really bad reaction to an infectious disease or to cancer or to heart disease or dementia. And in the case of COVID, what is it that means that the older you are, the worse the reaction if you get infected? And it looks like it's the immune system. Our immune system gets weaker as we get older. So if we could strengthen the immune system, how good would that be? And this is part of the philosophy of preventive medicine. You know, it's far better if we can focus on keeping people healthy rather than having to hurry and rush around when people become ill and try to patch them up. There's an English language statement, stitch in time saves nine. If we can address people's well-being first and their resilience, if we can improve their immune systems and their other inborn regenerative systems, which work quite well when we're young, but as we get older, they tend to fail, then how much better it would be. So many of the most interesting possible solutions to COVID, not just to vaccines. I mean, the vaccines are one way to strengthen our immune system, but more generally, how could we boost the immune system and our overall regenerative mechanisms? And that's a key part of the philosophy of transhumanism. It says that we should be improving our biology so that as we live longer, chronologically, we don't become weaker. We don't become physically more susceptible. And there are lots of very interesting ways in which transhumanism points to rejuvenation possibilities. Some of them borrowed from nature. Other creatures actually remain fit and healthy, even though they get older. So they don't age in that sense. They're said to have negligible senescence. So we can copy some of these mechanisms. In other cases, we can apply brand new artificial mechanisms to help us remain fitter and healthier. So that's one angle on the healthcare. Now, another angle on the healthcare is to realize that actually the work of big industry, the work of large pharmaceuticals, isn't always focusing on the most effective preventive medicines. Sadly, there are many diseases which big pharma has not prioritized. Especially there are diseases called neglected diseases, which afflict tens of millions of people in the developing world, which does not have good solutions because the people who are affected tend to be poor. They can't afford expensive medicines. But I have to say, the Malaysian government has been a strong supporter of a very important initiative called Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative, DNDI, which has prioritized work on these neglected diseases and has brought solutions. I think it's about 15 solutions it has brought to 6 or 7 of these neglected diseases over the last 10 years in its existence. And we should see more of that. The reason we don't have vaccines, the reasons we are struggling with vaccines for all coronaviruses, in part, is because there's not a big commercial case for them. Well, governments and philanthropic organizations generally should put more focus on to this kind of neglected diseases and better solutions, and then we can have greater health for everybody, a super health. But before I go on and talk about the possible changes in our social contract to deal with people who are out of work, I think I'll pass the microphone back to the two of you in case you want to comment further on these points first.
Mm-hmm. Yes. One of the specific points, especially when we focus on and try to understand this vaccine innovations and other things, country like a different developing nation, even actually Malaysia, try to create a not try to create, actually they already make a contract with Sinovac from China, I think 3 million vaccine and these things with them, and they are doing the business with the China with their palm oil. They will give palm oil to China, and China will give them vaccine for 3 millions. But other countries, there are many countries, let's say Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, Vietnam, different developing countries in Asia Pacific, this area we have, uh, how they can engage with these vaccine solutions. Even what your observation on the other hand from Bangladesh, Professor Dr. Mohammad Yunus, he come up with the idea that the vaccine for common goods. Okay, no, we have to declare it, otherwise many people do not get vaccine, they cannot pay, and they will die for these things. This is the concept already. Many of the global scholars like you, they are also joining with Dr. Mohammad Yunus for this vaccine for common good declarations. What your observations? How we should behave with this vaccine diplomacy? How we should play? Because yes, we know the developed nation like USA, UK, even Malaysia, they will get the vaccine. But what the other part of the world? What will happen in the future? What your observation?
Well, these initiatives that you mentioned are wonderful, and we should support them.
Mm-hmm.
If I look at some of the world's most famous vaccines, the one for polio, when I was young, still many people had a terrible experience
Mm-hmm.
a vaccine, and he didn't try to make a lot of money from the polio vaccine. He gave it away for free. And it's a remarkable thing that he did. And we should have more of that. Of course, the companies who do invest a lot of their time and effort should be rewarded, but most of it should be given away, frankly, because we're all in this together. And in fact, it's enlightened self-interest to make sure that everybody in the world is vaccinated, because if we don't vaccinate everybody, guess what? There is a possibility for the disease to remain in place. There is the terrible possibility for the disease to mutate and come out in a more deadly form and come back and affect us again. And in this new form, our current vaccines may not work. So we should prioritize around the world a combination of private initiative with businesses and also public initiative with governments and other philanthropic NGOs, working on not just one vaccine, but the root vaccine that will work on multiple diseases, and even more than that, on the improving our core regenerative capabilities so that we will shrug off these diseases in the future rather than being laid low by them.
Yes.
Exactly right. If I can interject here for a second. As we look at this, I absolutely agree with David's summation about this, and I want to point out, because you'd mentioned about China, I want to mention that as David said, we are all in this together. We are in this together as a world. It would be great to, from my point of view, to have some type of central planning and distribution of this, but multilateralism also is a good way to handle this. It's in China's best interest. It's in Russia's best interest. It's in the United States' best interest. It's in every country's best interest to see that vaccines are worldwide. Because if here in my state of Arizona, we were to be COVID-free, for example, that doesn't help if Mexico across my southern border or Utah across my northern border still has the virus raging. There are no islands in this. So I think putting any kind of differences aside on the national and international fronts may be difficult to do based on past performance, but we have something here to really lead us forward for the future. Once again, all in our own best interest.
Cooperation between countries on addressing communicable diseases. A communicable disease is a disease that if you have an outbreak in your country, you're supposed to communicate that fact to others. This took a long time to be established. I think the first international conference on dealing with communicable diseases was sometime in Paris in possibly the 1850s, when Europe had been ravaged by a whole series of outbreaks of, I think it might have been typhoid, or I can't remember exactly which disease it was. And the countries basically said, you know what? We all like to manage these things locally, but there is a common interest in all of us being honest and communicating outbreaks of this so that we can agree standards on quarantine. We can. It took a while to reach these agreements, but thankfully, more countries have signed up to it. But again, recently, sadly, one reason why we have this bad situation with COVID is a couple of political groupings wanted to cover up information about possible outbreaks. China's later response to COVID has been remarkable and very positive and should be praised, but in the early days there were at least some politicians in China who clamped down on news, and they didn't honestly report the fact that COVID could be transmitted from person to person. At first they said, oh, you can only catch COVID from an animal. And that was something they covered up. The US government, it also turns out, knew in January that this was a very serious outbreak, but some parts of the US government decided to cover up this information because they thought it would be bad for the market. So there's another example of a government that actually didn't share what it knew. And one of the learnings from this terrible pandemic is that we've got to force more governments to be more honest and to communicate this information. It's not going to be easy, but actually we are all interested in every country following that, because though we might not want to be honest and open about what's happening in our own country, we do want other countries to share that information. And so we actually have this common interest in having a powerful WHO. and a powerful CDC to transcend local national interests for the sake of all of our interests. So that's another lesson. It's not going to be easy, but we need to have that spirit of a global citizen alongside our own pride in whatever nation we are part of, but we've got to sit alongside this concern for global well-being.
Okay, okay. Mr. David Shumaker, my question is that, let's say uh, USA has elections. Okay, in November you have your own elections. On the other hand, we are observing that vaccine also playing an important roles in these elections. Even Donald Trump, he come up with the idea that okay, in the next month soon vaccine will come. What will be the impact, like if this vaccine is not helpful or secure for the for your local community? What the aspects and how I think that what your observation, what you should advise to your governments or your politicians about these vaccine trials and these issues?
Well, vaccines are very important, and there is no guarantee that a vaccine is right around the corner. We that deal in science and technology know that we can lay plans, we can have milestones towards goals that we work towards, and those can go off the rails at any time. We've seen that in the vaccine studies, that at least in 3 cases that I know of, that those have been paused because of safety issues. And I'm very pleased that not the fact that that the safety issue came up, but I am pleased with how it was handled, and the fact that safety is extremely important. These vaccines, once developed, are going to be widely distributed, so it's very important that they be safe, and it's important that the public have confidence in them when they come. Back maybe more to the question that you asked, though, I think has to do with the population. There are those that are pinning their hopes on vaccines, and then it's wearing a face mask in public, washing your hands, social distancing, something that many of us have been doing for 7 months now. For some people, they find that very difficult to do. They start to become COVID weary, if you want to call that, and then they start looking for a solution that's going to instantly fix this. So I've already said that that may or may not be coming. I personally think that we're not going to see a widely distributed vaccine in this country until sometime next year. And I won't even say what part of time next year, because there's still too many variables involved. And then there'll be the whole distribution scheme that will need to be developed to get those out to everyone. So it goes back to taking individual responsibility for what we can do now and stay hopeful for the future, but do what we can do now. And I think that that is what will see us through. Will everyone do it? Well, of course not. But I've been overall pleased with the amount of cooperation that I see among my fellow citizens here in Arizona. I live in a city of, the metro area here is about 4 million people. And so I see a level of participation here, which is not perfect, but it's good. I just recently spent 3 days in the country up in an area that had very low infection rate. And I was wondering what that would be like. Now, I took extra precautions coming from an area with a higher infection rate. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't potentially carrying something to them. But the people, it was an Airbnb that we stayed at. They had taken great pains for sanitation. They greeted us wearing masks. Talk to us about safety precautions, maybe good places to visit in their city and places that perhaps, if we are safety concerned, to stay away from. So I've seen kind of both sides of Arizona in this. And when we look at the news, we see the exceptions. I think generally speaking, we're doing well, but we do have COVID weariness to worry about. And another 7 months from now, that COVID weariness will be even more so. So yes, for a vaccine, take personal responsibility now.
Well, I want to take another question from audience. Araf Meras, you want to know, is philosophy ready to deal with the drastic change that the advent of transhumanism singularity presuppose for Mr. David Wood? Yes.
So indeed, there will be many drastic changes which will challenge some of the background assumptions that most of us have tended to operate with in our lives. For example, we have tended to assume that people get born, they live maybe 70 years and grow old and die. Well, maybe that's no longer necessary. Maybe technology will allow us to live indefinitely youthful. Or if people are on the point of dying, one thing that transhumanism points to is the possibility of preserving their bodies at a very low temperature in a state sometimes called frozen, but more accurately it's called vitrification. It's in a glass-like state in which all of the motion of the biology is suspended. And the view of doing this is so that in the future, once science has progressed even more, we might be able to reanimate them. We might be able to, and we do this at a time when whatever disease was on the point of killing them can now be cured. And that's a very shocking idea for many people. So that instead of dead people being buried or cremated, instead dead people or people who are legally dead, but they might be reanimated in the future, they might be cryopreserved. So that's another challenge. Yet another challenge is that people who have reached a certain age and have already gone through the menopause, can't bear any children, in the future technology might allow us to reverse the menopause. That's, again, a fairly shocking idea. Now, in the past, these shocking ideas did come from time to time, and we took some time to get used to them. I remember when test tube babies was a shocking idea, and I remember in the 1970s, many people were horrified by the idea. Some people said that a test tube baby would have no soul. Or those who didn't take the idea of a soul literally, they still said that when a baby found out that their mom and dad had them created in a test tube, they would be psychologically damaged. And many people said, well, we shouldn't be bringing more people into the world by this kind of strange scientific mechanism when the world's already overpopulated. So there was a big yuck factor in the 1970s toward test tube babies, which thankfully has now largely gone because there are many millions of people in the world who have been born by this mechanism. Many parents are delighted to have had the chance to have children, and the children, as far as we can see, have as much of a soul as anybody else. So we've gone through various surprises in the past, but what's different now is that more of these surprises are going to happen at the same time. There might be drugs that will allow us to change our gender, change our sexuality at will. There might be treatments that will quite radically change our bodies. It's not just that we might have tattoos or wear jewelry. We might even conceivably grow wings for a while or grow gills for a while. And people say, oh, yuck, I don't want to think about it. But no, we do have to think about it. And some of these things we will decide collectively are probably not good uses of our time and resources, but others we should accept and embrace. Just as we have embraced longer lives, just as we have embraced a greater diversity of ways of living, just as we have embraced test tube babies, there are many other things that we probably will embrace. But philosophy needs to catch up, and that's where transhumanism is pioneering with a lot of very interesting stuff. If you haven't come across transhumanism before, I do urge you, look up, for example, the humanityplus.org website, which is by the world's oldest membership body for transhumanists, Humanity Plus. It used to have a different name. It used to be called the World Transhumanist Association. I also urge you to look up the US Transhumanist Party, which David Shumaker can tell you about. They've got lots of fascinating material on their website too about the unique philosophical insights that transhumanism can bring to some of these questions.
Yes, Mr. David Shumaker, so how do you want to explain this drastic change and how actually people can more involve with this community?
Well, let me first start off and say thank you for mentioning the Transhumanist Party, David Wood. Transhumanist-party.org is where you'll want to go to read about our core values. We also have in detail laid out platform planks that I would encourage you to read. And if you may be surprised at the amount of agreement that you may have with some of the things that you read there. And if you do agree, then perhaps you're a transhumanist at heart, whether you wear that label or not. Now, back to talking about the changes that are coming. Yes, there's going to be a great many changes, but these changes are coming at an ever increasing rate as well. It would seem like in the past that we would have a change, and then there would be a period of time where we could adapt to it, and then there would be another change. But as David pointed out, there's going to be a great many changes, and then there'll be changes within those changes as we go forward, as the changes grow exponentially. So I've wrestled with that for myself. I consider myself to be someone very interested in the future, very interested in exploring new possibilities. But is there perhaps a limit to what I can absorb? How much of this new information can I absorb at a time? So that might be something for people to think about, whether you're on the delivery end of a new technology or whether you're on the receiving end of a new technology. Now, my personal way to go about this is take a look at what is of great interest to me, and then really look at what I can do to forward those changes, and how can I assimilate those kind of changes into my life and my lifestyle. So one of the changes that David brought up is cryonics, this idea of vitrification, being able to essentially put someone in suspended animation, take an ambulance ride to the future, if you will, and be then reinvigorated and brought back into society. That's something that I've personally bought into myself. I have spent a great deal of time researching it and decided that was right for me. And so I'm signed up with one of the cryonics organizations in the United States, and I'm very fortunate that one of them happens to be geographically very close to me. So that made it very convenient for a number of reasons. Now, the reason I'm talking about that is that was easy for me then to be able to research, to pick one technology out of a mass of technologies that are coming at me and decide if this is something that I wish to participate in. And then I'm more than willing to talk to other people about it. And in the Transhumanist Party, we have we consider ourselves a big tent organization, meaning there isn't one narrow ideology that everyone must agree with that, and then we march forward together in that. We take it seriously about putting science, health, and technology at the forefront. We take seriously our three core values, increasing life, health, lifespan and health span, rational thought and discussion, and working towards the reduction and elimination of existential risk. Those things are things that I can focus on, and I can appreciate many of the other technologies that come forward without feeling overwhelmed by them if I don't feel like there's an application for them for me at the moment. And let somebody else who does have that feeling for some of these others go forward. So I think managing this fire hose of new innovation and technology that is starting now and increasing every day is a very good way to look forward into the future. And having discussions like this, Sharif, I'm very glad for these discussions that we're having here, because being able to talk about these things to a large group of people and for people to pick and choose what they want to go forward with is the way that we can all go forward together.
Yes, sir, there are more questions from audience I want to take. Hosne Arafirdos, she asked question, how can AI and machine consciousness be improved? Should we concentrate more on philosophy of mind and psychology rather than just computation? Yes,
Well, that's a
Mr.
great
David.
question. I think absolutely we do need to think about psychology and values as well as just computing. We need to learn from what's happening inside the human mind. as it turns out, many of the largest AI companies in the world, I'm talking about companies such as Facebook and Microsoft and Google and IBM, as well as their Chinese equivalents. Many of them have got teams that have large numbers of people with PhDs in neuroscience, as well as people with PhDs in computer science. And they are trying to learn from what's happening inside the human mind, because some things that young human babies can do, we still can't copy yet in today's AI. And so we're trying to understand how young children can learn to discriminate between dogs and cats without having to see millions of pictures of dogs and millions of pictures of cats, the way that current AI learns. So rather than learning from big data, the human brain has the ability to learn from small data, one-shot learning. And we're making progress with that. And that's just one way in which the insights of from the human brain's operation and the human mind's operation can be applied in AI. But absolutely, we should not just focus on doing things faster and more efficiently. We have to look at the other concerns of the human character, human flourishing, kindness, collaboration, not just cleverness, but wisdom, not just strength, but kindness. And we should ensure that our AI systems are magnifying these impulses rather than just bringing us more power. After all, there is the famous saying that power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. If all we do is make AI systems that can compute faster, and we give people robots and drones and weapons that can be more powerful, that power is likely to corrupt even the best intended of politicians. We all know politicians who started off wonderfully, charismatic and idealistic and open-minded and socially concerned in younger stages of their career, but as they became older, they somehow got the victim of that statement that power corrupts. We absolutely don't want AI to be used by these politicians to dominate and build stronger positions of power. We must ensure that the AI is serving the broader needs of humanity.
Yes, Mr. David Shumaker, what you want to add in these discussions about this AI and machine learning consciousness?
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to start off by saying that I'm in no way any kind of an expert when it comes to AI, but I do have my own opinions. And right now, matter of fact, my position with the U.S. Transhumanist Party is Director of Applied Innovation. And the reason I bring that up is my focus many times on these technologies is while I look down the road and I wonder where they will be in the long run, I tend to like to focus on what can we do with them now or in the near now. And I think for AI in the near now, narrow artificial intelligence is a place where we will grow a lot of advantage. So maybe systems that help robotic surgeons be able to work more efficiently is one good example. So neuro AI, whether it be in financial markets, whether it be medical, whatever it might be, I point that out because humans still have a feeling of control when it comes to narrow AI. I think there is a feeling that when we get to general artificial intelligence, that we have something that's bigger than us, that we have lost control, that we're not perhaps the dominant species on the planet. But in narrow AI, it's something that we can feel much more in control of, much more useful to, and perhaps that's a stepping stone for us to being able to look at applying the principles that David talked about to have a beneficial general artificial intelligence at some point in the future. And it also gives us some time to be able to adjust to working with AI as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. There are more questions from audience. I want to take these questions. Okay, hello, sir. In current era, what is the most important challenge in biomechanism? Yes, sir. From Mr. David Wood. Yes.
So I'm not exactly sure what's meant by biomechanics. I do, however, point to a very interesting book by an Oxford University professor called Sonia Contera on nanomedicine. And what she points out in that book is that many of the most interesting things that are happening inside biology, they're not just in terms of interactions of genes, they also need to be understood from a physical level too, a mechanical level. For example, if we want to understand how various genes work, it's not just chemistry, it's the fact that the DNA is coiled up in a certain way and there can be different pressures on it. Physical pressures can result in different ways of expressing these genes. So, I mean, I really like this book by Sonia Quintero, who's spoken at London Futurists a couple of times. And she points out that we need to bring together insights from multiple different scientific and engineering disciplines, not just understanding of the genes, which is important, but also the understanding of the electromagnetic and electrostatic forces and the purely other physical forces. And if we can do that, then we can alter how biology operates. And we are looking forward to nanotechnology being successful at the biological level. We look forward to something called nanosurgery, nanobots operating. And if I can just point out the difference between an open heart surgery in which you cut somebody open and you go in with very large instruments, that takes a lot of recovery. If you compare that with microsurgery, when you can have a very small little incision and you can operate often with a much smaller, more targeted instruments, that can have lots of great results with much less healing. Well, in the future, with nanosurgery, we won't be cutting people open at all. We will be using little nanobots to navigate around people's bodies, a little bit like the chemicals in our bodies already work, but we will be reprogramming them. And if we can do this, the chances are we can have lots of repairs and improvements. And to do this, we will need to take advantage of the skills of biomechanics as well as the skills of software engineering. I think that can make lots of progress in the next 10 or 20 years. And if people are studying that, then I think you have a potentially very important role to play in the future of better healthcare.
Yes, Mr. David Shumaker.
Yes, that's absolutely fascinating, and I love the idea of nanosurgery. Going back to biomechanics, I too were not quite sure exactly what that meant, but the first thing that came to my mind was development of like exoskeletons, for example, to help people that have been paralyzed get up out of a wheelchair and be able to walk and to be able to move around. I also look at things like those that have been unfortunate enough to have, let's say, a leg amputee, and then be able to receive an advanced prosthetic that allows them to be able to have as much motion, range of motion, and speed of motion that they had prior to that. So these are things that, once again, demonstrate to people that science and technology really can maintain humanness as we move forward with mechanics. We still have the human involved in this person that can get up and move around now and walk that couldn't do that before. We have the person with the advanced prosthetic that I love to see on occasion when I come across one of these people that here in Arizona it's quite warm most of the time, so wearing shorts is quite the thing to do. And those people proudly show off that prosthetic. There's not a stigma to it as maybe there once was with overcoming a handicap. I think this is a marvelous step forward, and quite honestly may make it easier for people to accept things such as nanomedicine as we move on into the future. So I think those are very important things because there's things we can do now and they will lead us hopefully to the hopeful future that we're looking forward to.
And that reminds me, the talk of exoskeletons, let me mention something called Peter 2.0. That's what he calls himself. There is a software engineer in the United Kingdom called Peter Scott Morgan, whose body was becoming weaker and weaker due to affliction of a terrible disease called motor neuron disease, a disease, sadly, that I know about myself because my father was afflicted by that in the last few years of his life. It's a very terrible withering away. But Peter Scott Morgan decided to make himself an exoskeleton. And you can view videos of him online if you Google Peter 2.0 or Peter the Human Cyborg. There are films of him, and it's indeed quite wonderful how he has managed to extend his life and also his mobility. And even though he can't speak himself anymore, he's a little bit like Stephen Hawking, the famous British physicist, who couldn't speak either. He had a related disease. He didn't have motor neuron disease. He had something similar. And he spoke with an electronic voice. Well, Peter Scott Morgan's voice in some ways is even better. And it's quite enchanting. And it's a great combination of human values and human engineering. This is real transhumanism.
Sir, there are more questions from audience. I want to add Shumon. His question is that are we already convicted for the adaptation of artificial intelligence or transhumanism for future?
So perhaps what lies behind that question is a worry that artificial intelligence might do bad things, and that if we just embrace technology, maybe it will have undesired effects. Well, transhumanism is aware of these possible bad effects. As David Shumaker already mentioned, one of the three core principles of the US Transhumanist Party is to address the risks, existential risks. There's risks of technology turning out to have bad impacts. Indeed, artificial intelligence is to an extent helping to make more of us crazy due to the way it already operates on our social media, due to the fact that it knows us well and is able to be exploited by various politicians and commercial forces and by various hackers to push us into buying things we probably shouldn't buy, voting for people we probably shouldn't vote for, even falling in love with people we probably shouldn't fall in love with, you know. So that technology is being used to some extent for bad purposes, but we shouldn't decline it just for that reason. Just as we shouldn't say no to trains, because trains were used in various wars to help soldiers to move to the front line more quickly. Instead, we have to ensure that the technology is used for good, and artificial intelligence can be used for so many positive purposes. We can use it to help accelerate our understanding of cures for cancer and dementia and heart disease. We can use it to accelerate our design for successful nuclear fusion reactors, which will be comprehensive solutions to sustainable energy. We can use it to give the best guidance for how to restructure our economy so that everybody benefits and nobody is left behind. So let's ensure that we use the artificial intelligence wisely by putting human values to the forefront and transhumanist values, accelerating these values, and that will then help us to reach a state of human flourishing that has not been possible up until now.
Thank you. What do you want to add, Mr. David Shumaker, about this artificial intelligence adaptations and these things? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that David's answer was brilliant, by the way. I wish I'd said that. I also want to remind us that risks of technology is nothing new. They've been with us forever. If you go back to whatever humans first invented fire, fire allowed us to eat warm meals. It allowed us to dry and preserve food, and it also burnt down my hut if I wasn't very careful with it. So mitigating issues with technologies is nothing new. I'm hopeful that because of something that, as I was growing up, was a very serious concern, and that was nuclear war. I was of the age where there were actually nuclear drills in school. I was very young when this happened, but we were very concerned about the standoff between then the USSR and the United States and their abilities to essentially end life on this planet, or at least most of it, as we know. Now we've gone through 40, 50 years of this and have managed it pretty well. So I would say that there's good hope that we can manage these technologies as we move into the future and use the best of them. Let's use fire the best we can. Let's put nuclear energy to good, peaceful uses. And we have demonstrated that we can do this in the past, maybe not perfectly in some cases. I'm sure there's some exceptions that we can think of. But by and large, we've done that. And we can do that going forward. And AI is no exception to that.
Yes. There are more questions actually. Today audience has many questions. Onika Shams, her question is that, hello everyone, we are glad to hear from you. What is the assumption of the future for humanity? And another things are asked, could we translate conceptual language to speaking language by the AI?
Well,
Yes.
let me take a crack at the first one, talking about what we feel about the future. I agree with what I thought I heard David say earlier, that we're looking towards a very bright, very positive future. That if we look back over time, we can see that humanity has improved its lot as time has gone on. I would rather live in this time of the 21st century than going back, say, 200 years or 400 years. I project from my philosophy that 200 years from now, I will look back, and I plan to do that. I will look back and say, wow, the early 2000s was, I have some fond memories of that, but I'm really glad now that I live in the 2200s. So to answer that first question, I would say it's a very positive outlook going forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've spelt out my version of that positive outlook in this book, Sustainable Superabundance, a universal transhumanist invitation. It means that there'll be enough clean energy for everybody. There'll be enough healthy food for everybody. And when I say everybody, I mean tens of billions of people or even more. 20 billion people can live on this planet. We can have synthetic biology creating food in laboratories without needing to grow and kill and slaughter animals the way we do now. We can have an abundance of healthcare because we are addressing issues proactively and preventatively. And we can build a variety of diversity in which many people can live very different styles of life, but in an overall framework of collaboration. And what will we be doing with our time? I don't think we'll be working hard in the sense of trying to make money for a living. We'll be working hard on things that we passionately enjoy doing. There'll be like hobbies. There'll be exploring. There will be pursuit of music or art or drama or mathematics or exploring inner space or exploring outer space. They'll be reviewing great literature, creating great literature, and we'll be exploring amazing 3D virtual worlds that AIs create for us. We won't need to work for a living because the things that we need for a living, the food, the energy, the protection and clothing, will be provided by automation. They'll be provided by new technology. And so we should not be too worried about people losing jobs because of automation. Instead, we just need to ensure that the benefits and the fruits of that automation can be, in one way or other, redistributed so that everybody has enough for a good quality of life. Mm-hmm. So that's the vision of the future. In terms of new languages that AIs can adopt, I do look forward to having more meaningful discussions with AIs. Today, some of us talk to our AIs on our phones or on our screens. A member of my household a while ago did complain, Alexa, why are you so stupid? And then we were a bit hurt because the Alexa said, I'm sorry, I'm trying my best, displaying a kind of emotional intelligence which we didn't really expect. But it's still not very good today. But I do think the AIs will learn more and more. If you look at what's happened in the very recent GPT-3, produced by the company OpenAI, that was funded for a while by Elon Musk and has got Sam Altman as their CEO now. This GPT-3 has looked at huge amounts of text all over the internet and is able to maintain a more interesting and more persuasive style of communication. Now, it doesn't understand yet what it is saying, but perhaps by GPT-4 or GPT-5 in a couple of years' time, we will have a very engrossing conversations with our artificial intelligence partners. And that's how we'll spend more and more of our time, because these AIs will know us so well, and they will really, if we get it right, they'll be great coaches for us. They'll be giving advice. They'll be even whispering in my ear as I'm talking to you now. The AI of the future will be saying, David, mention this. David, slow down. You're talking too fast. David, don't forget to smile. All in the right ways. And so with that kind of relation with our intelligent assistants, it'll help us all to be better versions of who we can be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to take another question. There is a huge response from the audience today. Hosna Firdos, her question is, hello sir, could machine represent positive and negative thoughts and links and dislike as human do?
Well, I don't know about the part as far as humans do, but I would expect that AI would give preferential treatment to things that it considers beneficial to it, and then shy away from other things. So I think it will be able to express likes and dislikes. From a human standpoint, I'm not exactly sure where all my likes and dislikes come from. From my subconscious, perhaps, boiling up into my conscious and into my emotions. I don't really have a good idea as how that would work as far as AI is concerned. But yes, they would definitely have preferences for their own likes and dislikes based on their needs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What we are seeing is software that can understand human emotion, software which can learn what kind of emotions we've got, perhaps by looking at our faces, perhaps by listening to the tone of our voice, perhaps by seeing the very fleeting micro expressions on our face that often we might involuntarily let out by a small grimace or frown. The AI might spot that and may know what kind of emotion we are feeling. Secondly, we already have AIs that can manipulate our emotion by feeding us things that will make us more angry or more roused, or in other ways that will change our behavior. This field is sometimes called affective computing, and some of the robots have been designed so that the faces smile and frown so that humans are happier interacting with them. And is this good or bad? Well, it could be either. It can be misused in the ways that we've already discussed. Technology could be misused. If our emotions are being managed, they could be mismanaged to lead us into bad states that will lead us to voting for the wrong kind of politicians or buying the wrong kinds of things. But if it is used for good purposes, then it will help us, because the way we respond isn't just always to rational intellectual arguments. Sometimes we are positively swayed too by a friend who's able to smile and encourage us in the right way. So we have to recognize the possible positive role that this affective computing can have. And we have to also then figure out whose emotions are being programmed. And that's why we have to ensure that it is positive human values that are at the center of the programming, rather than just trying to make profit for a company, or just trying to spy on people to collect information from them, or trying to manipulate us to make us buy things that we don't need. So we have to ensure that the software, the AI, is beneficial AI rather than purely financial AI or manipulative AI.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Sir, beside that, we have huge amount of youth in Asia Pacific. Huge. I think more than 50%, even you focus on the Indian market, China markets, even in the Malaysia, Indonesia, there is a huge amount of youth. What your advice, how they can prepare themselves for 21st century, how they can grow their skills and their mindset? Yes.
You got to find the good things to read, and don't be misled by lots of rather shallow analysis. many of the stories and films, sadly, they're more for entertainment purposes and they don't have a true explanation. So please do find the good transhumanist books and videos in YouTube's. There's a very nice book written by, edited by Max Moore and Natasha Vitamore called The Transhumanist Reader. It sets out lots of things in a way that young people will be able to read and benefit. If you don't like that particular book, you will find lots of other recommendations on my website or on the US Transhumanist website. So learn, keep reading, read multiple sources. Don't just be content with one. And realize that this is a fast changing field. So if you do read one book which is maybe 10 years old, maybe you should be following that up quickly by reading new things. And get involved in this community. Get involved indeed in expressing some of the ideas in your own language, in your own words, in ways that make sense for your own communities. Because the way you learn something, best of all, is by teaching it. So if you take some of these ideas of transhumanism and re-express them for your own communities, you will learn much more quickly and you will be ready to take advantage of this technology and these thinking styles as they spread more quickly around the world.
Mhm. Yes, Mr. David Shumaker.
Yes, that's exactly right. Reading is incredibly important. Also, shows like this are incredibly important. And other shows like this. The U.S. Transhumanist Party has a salon that we put on Sundays, 1 p.m. U.S. Pacific time, and we invite various people that are involved in transhumanism or that would support transhumanist ideas to come talk with us for a period of time. I would then look at if those thoughts, those ideas appeal to you, then many of these people have their own form of communication, whether they be by books or by YouTube or by some other area, and look into that because these things will expand your own ideas of what you can do for your future. And then maybe at that point you say, well, gee, because of this, I want to become involved in this particular technology, or I want to become involved in this particular movement. And then if you can work towards the education for that, or if you can work towards becoming involved with other people that are interested in that, then they can then point you in the right direction for where you can learn to perhaps be able to monetize this. Working in programming, working in construction, whatever the 21st century technologies interests that you have, there's people out there talking about them. And shows like this are an important part of introducing that.
Mhm. I want to take a last question from audience. Mohammad Shoail Rana, hello sir. Is it possible to compare machine learning based prediction with manual rating?
So machine learning can be improved by manual ratings, of course. That's how machine learning gets going. It goes by training data, which has already had humans make various decisions. So it looks at what ratings humans have given to films on Netflix or books on Amazon or in other fields, and it tries to train in that way. What we need to do, however, is move beyond that kind of a training by looking at large amounts. And we need to have the next generation of AI, which is able to learn from smaller amounts of data, as I mentioned, the one-shot training or learning from sparse data. And I think when that happens, it will mean that AI suddenly becomes much more powerful than before. AI has already gone through a number of big seismic changes in the last 20 or 30 years. The flood of development with deep learning from about 2012 onwards caught most people by surprise in how good it was. When we get this other kinds of one-shot learning, unsupervised learning it's sometimes called, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's another idea that could accelerate AI. I think we'll find the changes even larger than the ones in the last 10 years. and we will need to be ready for it. So if you are studying AI, I encourage you to keep going at it. It's quite complicated. There's a lot of mathematics involved. There's a lot of programming involved. But the skill of the future will involve knowing how to live with AIs, how to work alongside AIs, and most important of all, how to customize and reconfigure AIs.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Before I go for the concluding remarks for today actually many audience actually joining. They come up with different questions and different views from different countries. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum, we are trying to engage with the youth community from Asia Pacific, and we have our research center, Asia Research and Development Institute. We have our Al Noor Academy, Sarhadia Barhad, where you're trying to engage with more talents and peoples around the Asia Pacific area. So we are planning to move forward. So in the futures, we need more of your support, more of your discussions, more of your collaborations and partnerships with World Talent Economy Forums. We will go for the definitely for 2021. We are planning for some of the big initiative in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Bangladesh, and in India. So hopefully we're going to invite all of you, maybe in online, maybe offline will be highly appreciable from our parts. So this is the plan, but we need more of your support. We need more of your guideline and advice. We want to grow with your advice and collaborations and guidelines. So my last question is that what will be the concluding remarks for today, especially if you give some specific guidelines for our youth community, because we want to engage with youth more and we want to support more of this youth community in Asia Pacific.
I want to start out by saying thank you for the invitation to be here and to talk. And I want to express how grateful I am to everyone that came to listen, especially those that are in your home country of Malaysia. And to your point, I would encourage Malaysians to take this into their own hands from the standpoint of consider a local chapter of a transhumanist chapter of some type, whether it be affiliated with the transhumanist party that I am, because we are affiliated across the globe, or whether it be with Humanity Plus, or why not do as I do? I'm a member of both, for example. But having your own peer group discussions and then being able to plug into ideas from elsewhere on a very regular basis, I'd say, would be a very good way to go forward. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir, joining us today. Yes, Mr. David Wood. Yes.
So I've got a couple of suggestions, especially for younger people, as to how to respond to some of this discussion. In terms of the most important skills for the future, I think we have to recognize that the pace of change is going to increase and there will be many surprises ahead. So one of the most important skills is adaptability, or is sometimes called agility, agile, which means that you need to be able to experiment and learn new things quickly from a state of a lot of uncertainty. So learning agility, learning how to learn as well, because whatever you have learned in the past, quite often you'll need to learn new things. So constant education is very important as well. And alongside the skills of agility and rapid education, I will put one more skill, which is the skill of politics. And why do I say politics? I mean politics with a capital P, not just a small p. I'm not just talking about being able to interact with different groups of people. I mean influencing the political structures, because we need a new social contract. We can't continue the same as before with a social contract that expects most people to earn money from a living. We're going to need to change the social contract to have something like a universal basic income as part of it, and many other aspects of kind of redistribution that allows the businesses to thrive and do good things, but also looks after those who would otherwise be left behind. So you need to get involved in politics to an extent too. So learn about the social implications of these rapid changes. And the final thing I would ask, especially people in the audience, is we've described transhumanism as a big tent. There are lots of people in it from different backgrounds. And let me say there are groups of people who call themselves Christian transhumanists. There are Buddhist transhumanists who are well organized. There are certainly people who would see themselves as atheist transhumanists or agnostic transhumanists. But there are fewer groups of people that I would recognize as Muslim transhumanists. Now, I know people who come from a Muslim background and who are very active in transhumanism, but I think there should be more bridges built between the positive Muslim communities. So people will remain Muslims, they'll keep their Islamic identity, but they will see themselves as increasingly transhumanist in the same way that there are Christians who see themselves as transhumanists and Christians. And I know that the type of Islam that's in Malaysia is often remarkable and wonderful. I've had great experiences with many Muslims in my visits to Malaysia where I have felt these are truly remarkable people. They are confident in their faith. They're not narrow-minded. They're not doctrinaire. They're not dogmatic. They are very open. And so I appeal to some of the people in the audience who will come from an Islamic background to explore what it might mean to be Muslim transhumanists and possibly set up such a community.
Thank you, sir. This is actually excellent sessions for World Talent Economy Forums, and we want to invite you more because your advice, your guidelines, especially people has a lot of questions. Even regularly, they come up with a lot of questions. Even if you allow us, we want to do a series with your team with these panels. Like example, maybe we can do another 3 or 4 discussion. Maybe by this way, our audience, our youth community, our peoples, our university students, they can learn more about the futures. They can understand what they have to do. So your mentorship, your monitorings, all both of you are highly experienced and highly educated. So it will be really, really valuable for World Talent Economy Forums. Thank you, sir, for your valuable times. And definitely we're going to invite you more in our policy discussions.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
sir.
It's a real pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.